meeting is over and send them to Madam Maswangani. Let's then proceed. I also have got no interest to declare. Let's then proceed to go to agenda item 5, which is a decision and reasons for decision on the tariff application by Astron Energy. For its petrol storage facility in Wadlu, which is here in the Tshwane Metro, Gauteng Province. EM, Madam Chua.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, members and colleagues. Ms. Mahupela will take us through that tariff application. Thank you.
Please take us through, highlight the key issues because you take all matters as read.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The purpose of the submission is to request PPS to approve the tariff of 11.03 cents per litre as applied by Astron Energy for the operation of its petroleum storage facility in Wadlu, and to also approve the decision and reasons for decision document attached as Annexure A and also to note Annexure B. On 30 July 2021, Astron submitted a tariff application for the period of 1st January 2022 to 31st December 2022, which was deemed adequate on 8 September 2021. The Wadlu facility consists of 8 storage tanks with a total design capacity of 26,237 cubic meters. In 2017 tariff period, NERSA approved a tariff for this facility, but the tariff was based on the standard costing option methodology that allowed the use of notional values to calculate the allowable revenue. In this tariff application, Astron applied for a tariff of 11.03 cents per litre, and NERSA determined a tariff of 10.94 cents per litre, which results in a percentage difference of 1%. And currently, the facility is for own use, as there are no third parties utilizing the storage. But in case this tariff is for in case a third party is interested to store in this facility. The difference in the tariff approved by Astron and that determined by NERSA is mainly due to the different REP values, different OPEX, and also the WACC values. It is therefore recommended that PPS approve the tariff applied for by Astron for its storage facility, and that the decision and reasons for decision be approved for publication, and to also note the analysis of the tariff methodology version 4.1 that is attached here to as Annexure B. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Mahupela. I think what is important that you have also attended to the issues that we consistently raised as a committee in terms of issues like the pictorial depiction of the facility, the volumes, estimates, and what the facility is going to be used for. I will leave it at that. So thanks for improvement in that regard. Madam Maswangani, I see your hand is up.
Chairperson, I just wanted to confirm that we are live on YouTube and Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mateja. Gerald? Thank you very much. May we then proceed on that basis. I will then give the opportunity to members to ask questions, comment, and give any guidance. Members by show of hands. I will start with Mr. Kumete, then Mr. Sbanda. Over to you, Mr. Kumete.
Thank you and good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, members and colleagues. I first start by indicating my support for the submission, but I've got a couple of questions. Well, really just one real question. That's on page 7, sorry. And maybe just to clarify my understanding, is that in terms of the methodology, we calculate trade receivables, we calculate cash, and calculate all of the other trade payables. The question I'm asking is, why do we estimate? Why do we use estimates when there would ordinarily be? I would assume that in terms of the RRM, that there would be actuals that could be drawn from the balance sheet. Why are we using estimates? Again, maybe it's just my misunderstanding of that statement in there. If can that be corrected? Then the other one on paragraph 29. There are things that are the percentage calculation between Astron and NERSA is been struck through as indicated as confidential. Why is that confidential? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumede. Mrs. Banda.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'm also happy with the recommendation. Just have one or two questions. On page 26, table 6, so we received some latest projections from Astron, which we have used. And I see in paragraph 53 that there are some explanations in terms of the changes that were effected. However, what I needed clarity on is on employee benefits vis-a-vis salaries and wages. So employee benefits have increased from the amount in the application to the latest projection, but at the same time, you've got salaries and wages decreasing. And so I was trying to reconcile this with the explanation given on 53A, that this was due to vacant positions, but then you've got salaries and wages that are decreasing after that adjustment, or after that realization that these vacancies will actually be filled. And then on land rehabilitation, Chairperson, is just a concern that we still have licensees that are not making provision for land rehabilitation. And on our side, I think we've done well in terms of publishing the guidelines. However, I think we need to probably just drive the point home that this particular licensee needs to make provision for land rehabilitation. And from our side, Chairperson, I think it will be advisable that we should follow up on this particular matter and not just leave it at commentary as we've done under paragraph, actually it's from paragraph 56 to 61, but I think we need to follow up and ensure that the licensee actually makes provision for land rehabilitation. And then lastly, under volumes, paragraph 73 and 74, can we just express our view on the volume estimates there? Because all we've done is just to provide the licensee's view without necessarily expressing whether we are comfortable with the projections or not. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. If you may just respond, Madam Makgopela and Ian.
Chairperson, if I may start, I think on the issue of land rehab, we take the guidance, and maybe as a division, we'll need to find ways of how we need to ensure that the licensees follow through in terms of ensuring that there is cost. On the other question, maybe I'll ask Ms. Bogo to come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I'll start with Mr. Kumede's questions. With regards to the calculation of net working capital, Mr. Gomede asked why we use estimates when they are actually actual costs. So here, the reason for using estimates based on allowable revenue and OPEX is to facilitate efficiencies. So that's why the estimates are used there. So what the energy regulator is basically saying is that the costs or the calculation of net working capital would be limited for receivables to 45 days of allowable revenue, to 30 days of allowable revenue, I'm sorry. And then for cash, it would then be operating cash, it would then be 45 days of OPEX. So the main reason is facilitating efficiencies from the licenses side. And there's a question on relating to paragraph 29. Chairperson, here you will appreciate that should that information be available to the public with the methodology also published, we may have licenses that may target to max the parameters. So that it was then decided previously that the guideline, which relates to the parameters, will be kept confidential, such that licenses may use the methodology to the T without any incentive to actually max the parameters. Coming to Mr. Sibanda's questions, the first question related to employee benefits that are increasing whilst salaries are decreasing. We also probed on this matter, Mr. Sibanda, and what the licensee responded to say was that in as much as there was a decrease in salaries, it was at levels lower and not at executive levels. So the related benefits are still increasing, though the salaries are decreasing in this case. We noted there's a similar matter with the Transnet application, and this same reason was provided by another company, being Transnet in this case. So this is something we are monitoring closely, and then we will also look at the actual values post-auditing to verify this. And yes, we take heed of the guidance on the land rehabilitation. I must also mention that Mr. Mkhize, our FTRM, has also requested that the team holds a workshop with stakeholders so we can also discuss the recently published prudency guidelines. And we will express our views as NERSA on the volumes, and we do accept the volume projections that were put forth by Astron in this case, and we'll indicate that in the RFD. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Madam Bogo. Members, just want to check if you are happy with the responses, if there are any follow-ups. I take it that there are none. So you will then have to enhance the submission as well as the RFD as responded. I think do follow up also in terms of the workshops that you are going to have with stakeholders, as you articulated, and the need to drive the point home that not providing funds does not then absolve the licensee from still ensuring that they do the rehabilitation at the time of that needs to happen. There was just one thing that I'm not so sure of. There was a question. I think I'm trying to find it out. Maybe Kumete, as you raise your hand, you touch on it when you talk about confidentiality. Mr. Kumete.
Thanks, Chairperson. It was just a quick follow-up on that, on the response on the use of estimates. And the question that I guess that arises, Chairperson, for me is whether do we take the lower of the numbers provided by, because it is possible that we could be dealing with with a licensee that may have trade receivables a lot lower than what we are estimating and so forth. That in fact are we not penalizing if we do indeed have a licensee that is doing that? Are we taking the lower of the two in terms of the cost for the benefit of the consumers? Thanks.
Thank you. Madam Bogo?
Thank you, Chairperson. Currently, Mr. Gumede, we do not, and I do take the point that maybe in our aim to facilitate efficiencies, we are somehow falling short in instances where the costs are actually lower than the limit. So this is something that maybe we need to incorporate into this review of the methodology on this front. Otherwise, currently the methodology does not cater for that. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I think anyway we have to live with the, Oh, sorry, I just got to note Mr. Massetti, I note your hand.
Thanks, Chairperson. Chairperson, I wanted to just comment on the issue of failure to make provisions for rehabilitation, for land rehabilitation. I think it is something that we must take seriously because it is what is required in the regulations. So we should not ignore it. If licensees are not complying with that specific regulation, then it means we must take action in order to then to force them to comply. So we could therefore make a finding, not in this instance, or in this forum now, but we should be able to make a finding of non-compliance with the specific regulation against the licensee. And if they still not comply within the timeline that we've specified, then issue a notice of non-compliance and proceed on that basis. The reason is that at the end of the licensed activity, should they decide to abandon or cease to operate, we will have a problem because we did not monitor whether or not there are sufficient funds to continue with the rehabilitation, and we actually had legal tools in our hands to ensure that licensees comply. So I would like to say that it is something that must be followed up through compliance in all instances where licensees are not able to comply with the relevant requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Massetti. I take it that what you've just said is further enhancement, because when we're talking of the workshops and engagement of licensees, it doesn't preclude that we take the necessary steps in terms of compliance monitoring and enforcement. And then with regard to the estimates, I take it also that it is the issue of the basis of the estimate, because by its nature, the determination of a tariff is forward-looking, but the basis must be sound and also take into consideration efficiencies and the affordability by consumers. Having said that, members, just want to see by show of hands if you approve or support the recommendation as articulated in paragraph 37.
Chairperson?
Yes.
I was hoping that you will note the other comment I made on the chat, since I didn't want to take your time, where I made a suggestion that perhaps in future tariff applications, when we do our analysis, if we could kindly include a table that compares these tariffs, especially these the facilities, size of the facilities, and the tariffs that are proposed in a particular region or geographic area. This is for purposes of assessing whether the tariffs that we approve are competitive when they are compared with other licensees that operate in the same geographic area. It will depend how we define that geographic area or the scope of that geographic area, Chair. But I think those things will be good in terms of enhancing our analysis, even on the market and the competitiveness of the tariffs before we take decisions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I think that will also be taken into consideration if one looks at the revised methodology, which will, if you look at the volume rules, will also be looking at something that's similar to that, depending on how it gets accommodated. So I take it that EM and the team, you will duly consider this comment as put forth by Madam Massetti. Thank you very much. Having said that, I would just like to see by show of hands from members if you approve of the recommendation as articulated in paragraph 37. I will read it out once we've come to a decision. Thank you, Mr. Kumede. Thank you, Madam Mr. Sibanda. Thank you, Madam Massetti. The Petroleum Pipelines Subcommittee approves the tariff of 11.03 cents per litre applied for by Astron for the operation of its petroleum storage facility in Wadlu, Gauteng Province, for the period 1st January 2022 to 31st December 2022. Also approves the decision and reasons for decision document, which is attached as Annexure A, and notes the analysis of the trial run of the tariff methodology version 4.1, which is attached as Annexure B, subject to the incorporation of the comments as articulated during the meeting. Thank you very much. This then concludes item 5. We're moving to item 6, which is the final findings, a report on the monitoring of actual tariffs charged by licensees in the period 1st July 2019 to 30 June 2020. Over to you, EM.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. Gaba will take us through the findings of this monitoring process that we started on last year, and we presented preliminary findings to the PPS last year, and then this past few months we've been working on the final findings with the comments from the licensees. So Mr. Gaba will just take us through the highlights of the findings. Thank you.
Mr. Gaba.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, everyone. As the EM has stated, this is a follow-up report to the inaugural one that was noted by PPS on the 4th of March in 2021. That was a report which presented preliminary findings on how licensees, or rather 6 licensees that have responded to the request for information, had charged the actual tariffs that were approved by the energy regulator for the period of 1st July 2019 to 30 June 2020. On 30 April 2021, the energy regulator sent letters to 6 licensees, namely BPSA, Sunrise, Bergen Cape, DJ Erasmus, Shell, and FFS, informing them of the preliminary findings determined by the energy regulator. These letters informed, as stated, these letters informed the 6 licensees of the preliminary findings based on the information that was submitted by them. After informing them of the preliminary findings, the licensees did submit the responses to the energy regulator, and subsequent meetings or clarification meetings were held with the licensees. This report aims to bring you the final findings, or the preliminary findings, the responses by the licensees, as well as the final findings based on the responses that that were submitted by the licensees, as well as the follow-up meetings that were held. I won't go into each and every responses or the final findings, as it is taken as read. However, I would like to note that this was the first process in monitoring licensees' actual application or implementation of the tariffs approved by the energy regulator, and there were a few obstacles that we had to overcome. However, the team has since revised this approach through lessons learned from this process for subsequent processes to follow, and in order to improve licensee responses to requests for information, and also the quality of information received from licensees, in order to provide a comprehensive and a useful monitoring reports for the reports on the petroleum tariffs applied. So with that said, it is recommended that the PPS approves the final findings on the monitoring of actual tariffs charged by licensees in the period of 1st July 2019 to 30 June 2020, and that we notify the 6 licensees of the energy regulator's final findings. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Over to members for any questions, comments, or guidance by show of hands. Mr. Sibanda.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you to the team. I'm happy with the recommendation. Just want to raise a few issues. Chair, I think perhaps it will assist where we cite specific sections of the Act or license conditions, just to indicate what that particular provision says or what the condition says. I'll give examples. For instance, on page 7, when we talk about BPSA and condition 17.2, I'm looking at paragraph 5314. I don't know what that condition says. So it will help perhaps just to indicate what that condition stipulates. And then on paragraph 5.3.20, I just found it strange that a licensee would submit redacted copies of documents to the regulator, because information to the regulator can never be confidential. It is confidential to the public, but not to the regulator. So I don't know what was our response to that, but I just find it strange that we would accept redacted information from a licensee. And then a similar issue under 5.3.23, that condition 16.1, again, I'm not sure what it is. However, when we make a finding in paragraph 5.3.35, we don't talk to whether we found compliance with condition 16.1 or not. So our finding is only with respect to section 28.1, read with section 28.6 of the Act, but we're not saying anything regarding what we thought was non-compliance with condition 16.1. Maybe just for completeness, we need to then indicate that. And then under 5.3.39, when we talk about Shell's counterparts, I was a bit confused. I'm not sure who we're referring to here. Is it competitors or is it customers? But we use the term counterparts, so I wasn't quite sure who exactly are we talking about here. And then under 5.3.42, just a question on whether we have guidelines on distinguishing features. If not, perhaps it's something that we need to look into. And then lastly, paragraph 5.3.46, the question of non-compliance with section 28.2 regarding tariffs. I just get a sense, Chair, that perhaps it's something that we've been very lenient around, because we let licensees operate based on tariffs that were approved 3, 5, 6 years ago, and we don't seem to be following up on that. I mean, just the application that we dealt with now. I mean, the licensee is using a tariff that was approved about 3 years ago, but we are saying that this is non-compliance with section 28.2. So I wasn't quite sure whether indeed is this real non-compliance, because we always say that, well, if a licensee has not applied for a tariff, they continue to use a tariff that was approved whenever it was. So it's not clear to me whether this is non-compliance or not. Maybe just clarity on that. I think that's all from my side. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sibanda. Madam Massetti.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, mine is on the sufficiency of the of the analysis that led to the non-compliance findings. It appears that the basis for indicating that these licenses, for instance, in the case of Bergen, that finding of non-compliance is purely based on the volumes, just the observation on the volumes that were purchased by its customers. And that's how the team has based its analysis to say that Bergen charged different or discriminatory tariffs. However, it appears, therefore, if that's the only identifiable difference, it appears that the team has not inquired with Bergen whether that difference is caused by other identifiable differences, such as load profile and duration of contract and all of those that are listed under Section 21. It also did not make mention of whether the team has satisfied itself that this difference that is the basis of non-compliance, whether now they've eliminated other reasonable, legally justifiable explanation that Bergen could use in its defense to state that no, those different tariffs that were charged, it is because of these other identifiable differences that are stipulated in Section 21. So I wanted to just understand how do we pass that hurdle? Should there be an explanation from Bergen to say that no, from our side, we used that, for instance, maybe the issue of the duration of contract, and it could be that these are not equivalent transactions. If you look at the different customers based on the duration of contract, or maybe the load profile and other differences that are recognized in Section 21. So how do we deal with that? Because it is not, there's no statement that covers that, so that we make sure that the findings are solid, and therefore the recommendation that is brought to the regulator for a decision has been looked into from that angle. That is just my comment, Chairperson, and I think that it is important before we take the final decision on this matter. And that's not only in terms of Bergen, I was just illustrating the point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I take it that the team will then respond to the questions posed, but just want to highlight that the issue of direct quotation of conditions as well as the sections of the Act, you just need to take that as an enhancement. Going forward, let's make sure that that is done, and also to clearly indicate if a condition has then been met or not, to the extent that there is compliance. May respond, EM and your team.
Thank you, Chair. We note that guidance. Mr. Kabo, you can come in. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As stated, I do note Mr. Spander's guidance. Also in terms of 5.3.35, in terms of completeness, we'll take that guidance as well. 5.3.39, the reference to counterparts is actually meant for customers, their customers. I think we'll also rephrase that so that it is much more clear. On the question of whether we do have guidelines on distinguishing features, unfortunately, so they are not present, but it is something that as a team, when we're discussing way forward or the results of the monitoring, it is things that we have highlighted and for future implementation as well. In terms of DJ Erasmus being non-compliant or not, and remember, sir, when we requested the information initially to be able to come up with the preliminary findings, it was based on the current tariffs that they're charging their customers right now. And in terms of what they were charging their customers, or the actual tariffs that they were charging their customers and what was approved by the energy regulator, they were overcharging they were charging above what was approved by the energy regulator, which indicated that the tariff, they were non-compliant, which indicated a non-compliance. And this is when we had responses from them that they did not know that they had to apply for a new tariff, which they're in the process of, I think we are considering the application as we speak. So, with regards to Ms. Maseti's question, in subsequent meetings, Ms. Maseti, we did try to implement all of the features of Section 21 when monitoring each response from each licensee. And the conditions differed from licensee to licensee. In the case of Bergen, they did, in a meeting that we held, submit that the only feature of distinction between their customers was actually volume, and which is why we concentrated on that. Otherwise, if everything else remained the same, the customers would be charged at the same price or same tariff. However, because there are these intricate contractual arrangements in terms of volume, then this would be the only distinguishing feature, if I may put it that way, that we would use in order to identify non-compliance. I hope that is sufficient.
I think, Mr. Kaba, thanks for the responses, but you just need to respond also in terms of 5.3.20, in terms of redacted information, as to whether is it really proper for us to be in receipt of that as a regulator, instead of clarifying that. And I think that is also important to highlight that this is a follow-up. I think where you're falling short in future reports, don't just only provide the summary, please do provide attachments in terms of the engagement and what actually transpired, whether the information that you receive from the customers vis-a-vis what you receive from the licensee, just to be very clear in terms of proving the point. If you may just then respond to that, the redacted information, as well as the period for the tariff, because you recall that the FTRM had indicated that all those that are about, I think it's 3 years or 5 years up, I mean, since the approval of the tariff need to be directed to apply for a new tariff, which the team duly did. But I think that we also need to go and look at the law. By the law, I'm including the rules in terms of how to ensure that we don't have an unreasonable time lapsing for the tariff, to make sure that it is then fair to the consumers and the licensees themselves too. If you may just respond to the redacted information part and the period. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I note also your guidance, Chair, and in future reports, that is what we'll also implement in order to make it more comprehensive for the members as well. In terms of the redacted information, Chair, we had a meeting with BPSA subsequent to them providing their response to information, to the preliminary findings, and in order to understand what they actually meant. So just to cut a long story short, they indicated that they have 2 sets of contracts, which is a throughput agreement as well as the purchase ex-country agreement. So our inquiry was to find out what is the distinction between the 2 contracts. And the throughput contract is actually what they deem as appropriate for NERSA to regulate, which is the usage of the storage the storage facilities. So where the NERSA approved tariff would actually be implemented. But in terms of those agreements, there was comprehensive information that was subsequently submitted. The reason why we did not place so much emphasis on the ex-country agreement, which had the redacted information, they explained that this is actually where NERSA does not play a role in these kinds of contracts, is where the NERSA approved tariff is not even implemented. This is where they are simply used as a vehicle, and no storage is facilitated, or even loading is facilitated when it comes to these contracts. And this is simply just, they are used just as a sort of a bridge from receipt to customer. So no NERSA jurisdiction when it comes to these kinds of contracts, the purchase ex-country agreements. Hence, we did not place much emphasis on the redacted information, where in terms of the explanation when these contracts are concerned.
I don't find that response very convincing. Please qualify that sentence accordingly, because it leaves one with an impression that what was provided was not adequate. And secondly, as a regulator, would like to get information, because there could be other things that are not necessarily within our purview, but they've got a bearing in terms of the work of the regulator. Please do correct that. On the period, I've already indicated, and I think it's important then that we take action in this regard. Let's go revisit the age of those tariffs and request them to submit information, applications, as well as tighten up our rules to look at maybe what principles to utilize to determine when a person should be applying. And then lastly, when it comes to the distinguishing features, Section 21 does note certain aspects, but I think that to assist licensees, let us develop those guidelines to help us going forward. With all of those issues considered, may we then proceed then to look at the recommendation as articulated under paragraph 12, 12.1, 12.1.1, and 12.1.2. Members, by show of hands, if you do support, noting the explanations that have been provided and which will be duly incorporated into this report. Thank you, Madam Maseti, Mr. Gumede, Mr. Sibanda. I also do support. So the Petroleum Pipelines Subcommittee approves the final findings of the monitoring of actual tariffs charged by licensees in the period 1st July 2019 to 30 June 2020. And NERSA and approves also that NERSA notifies the 6 licensees of the energy regulator's final findings. This then concludes item 6, and we proceed then to item 7, which deals with the drawdown. Transnet SOC Limited's request for the drawdown of funds for the decommissioning of the Durban to Johannesburg pipeline. Just also talk to any figures being confidential so that we can be duly sensitive to those matters. Madam Toa.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Ms. Kosi will assist in terms of raising highlights, and especially the reason why there are figures that we have recommended not to be approved and figures that we recommended that they need to be approved, and the difference thereof. Ms. Kosi, through you, Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and good morning to members and colleagues. The purpose of this submission is to request the PPS members not to approve the withdrawal of funds amounting to 34 million as requested by Transnet, and only approve the withdrawal of available funds in the Transnet Pipelines Trust account. And these funds were verified by NERSA to be available for the decommissioning of the DJP. And also to approve the decision and reasons for decision document attached here to as Annex A. On the 25th January 2021, Transnet submitted a request to NERSA for the drawdown of funds to the tune of 34 million for the purpose of decommissioning of the DJP Southern network. The actual funds accumulated by Transnet and set aside for rehabilitation is amounted to that value that I won't disclose. The financial provision made by Transnet through this grossly lower than what Transnet requires for the decommissioning of the DJP. Transnet proposed that the deficit in excess be recovered through the clawback from future customers. NERSA is of view that financial provision of for land rehabilitation should be made whilst the assets is operational. In terms of the guidelines for the prudency assessment, meaning the prudency guidelines, Transnet should not be allowed to recover the decommissioning funds from the future customers who will not be benefiting from the use of the DJP Southern network. At the pre-hearing of the 18 November 2021, PPS members deliberated on this matter and raised some comments as stated on table 1 on page 6, and management also provided responses. It is therefore recommended that the PPS members not to approve the withdrawal funds of 34 million and only approve the withdrawal of the available amount in the trust fund account for Transnet, and also approve the decision and reasons for decision that is attached as Annex A. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Kosi. Any questions, comments, or guidance from the members by show of hands? Madam Maseti, then Mr. Sibanda.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I think on the issue of, well, I'm on the recommendation, and we can also just enhance our reasons thereof. On the issue of clawback, because we've dealt with it in 2 meetings previously, sometime last year. We made it clear that we based on certain principles that we will not allow Transnet to claw back the gap, the shortfall from future tariffs. So that must be made clear here. I don't think the presenter made that very clear. It just stated that they should not claw back from future customers or something like that. We must state clearly that that principle of clawback is not allowed. Let's state it clearly why it is not allowed, because we had put the reasons, and we even did a summary to make it easier for staff to write up the reasons why the clawback mechanism is not an appropriate approach for this kind of financing of the land rehabilitation. And all this, it goes back to how they manage those funds, how they use them, and whether they complied fully with the specific regulation on land rehabilitation. But also, it has to do with how we monitor the sufficiency of the funds that are supposed to be protected and put aside for land rehabilitation, because that, again, it's something that we should check periodically to see whether such funds are still well protected. Are they sufficient? And also in terms of the value and the inflation adjustment, are those funds the value that is available, would it be sufficient in terms of covering the work that is expected? So maybe on that part, we just need to see what we can do from our side to try and avoid this kind of a situation that we are now faced with. So if that, Chairperson, can be checked on the issue of the clawback, and maybe then it will be appropriate for us, and I'm not sure how we can do it, to then indicate how the DJP decommissioning or the funds for the DJP, for the shortfall, how that shortfall should be should be funded without taking it from the tariffs and making it a burden of consumers that are utilizing the facility. So we just make it clearly that it is something that cannot come through the tariff, but Transnet must find ways and means of financing that, as that is not the responsibility of its customers. Thanks, Chairperson. We may find some right way of putting it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Maseti. Mr. Sibanda and then Mr. Kumete.
Chair, I'm happy with the recommendations, and I think I'm covered by Ms. Maseti. I wanted to also emphasize the fact that the question of the shortfall is still not resolved, and I'm talking about the amount on paragraph 10. I'm not sure if that amount is confidential, but we just need to make it clear that Transnet needs to find a solution around that particular issue, and that really I think the ball is in Transnet's court. We don't agree with the proposed approaches to fund that shortfall. Transnet just needs to find a solution to that, so that it's clear, Chair, because this matter is going to come back once the funds are depleted. I mean, once what is available is depleted, I think this matter is still going to come back. So I think we need to make it quite clear in this decision that Transnet needs to find a solution to that shortfall. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sibanda. Mr. Kumete.
Thanks, Chairperson. A question and comment. The question is, I'm just seeking an explanation of paragraph 31, because I don't quite know what it means for me. And maybe it links very much to my maybe comment or guess question. I don't know how to phrase it, but the concern I have is that we have particular in the I guess in the energy sector, we have got facilities that date back to 1954 and all of that. That yes, morally they should have been provided for in terms of what happens when they are decommissioned, but there was no legal. At some point, there was no legal obligation until NEMA came into being. And in respect of the Petroleum Pipelines Act, which only came into effect in 2005, it's even much later. Now, the question that arises in my head is one that simply says, how do we balance this dilemma that says, yes, morally, and it's the right thing to do, that companies should have made provision, whether provided by law or not, they should have made provision that at the end of the life of that particular useful nature or the usefulness of that particular facility, they would have actually had to decommission it and return the land to what it previously was. Now, as indicated, you've got a huge deficit between what the numbers that have been proposed in terms for Transnet to do the right thing, as depicted in paragraph 10, and what has been available or has been collected since then. How do we propose that companies should do this? And also, do we put it upon ourselves to make sure that companies that had not provided for this, that at the termination of the use of the facilities, that they actually are forced to do something that perhaps was not a legal obligation when they started operating? So, like in this particular case, this particular piece of pipeline, how do we enforce something like this? I mean, also, I guess the question is, what does that paragraph for me mean, that paragraph 31? Thanks, Chair. But Chairperson, just to indicate that I do support the actual recommendations. Just a question of concern.
Thank you very much, members. Thanks, Mr. Gumede. Thank you very much. We then proceed to the response by the team. May you please respond, Madam Toy, your team.
Thank you, Chair, if I may.
You may proceed, ma'am.
Yeah. Thanks, Chairperson. I'll start with Ms. Maseti's comments and questions. We'll enhance the decision in this case to indicate that the clawback mechanism may not be used for finding the shortfall for the reasons outlined in that document. So we will do that as guided by members. And with regards to the monitoring of sufficiency of funds by NERSA periodically, they recently published guidelines actually incorporate a section on this, where licensees are required to then review the sufficiency and adequacy of funds on a period of 5 years. Like every 5 years, they have to do this review to ensure that the funds that are being reserved for this purpose are sufficient and adequate. So that's what we have done to cater for that. And then I think the other one was guidance, or in terms of us explicitly indicating in the RFD how then should the decommissioning shortfall be funded, and we will do that, Chair, as guided. Yeah, I think Mr. Sibanda's question also relates to matters that Ms. Maseti already raised. So we hit that and we'll action as guided. Coming to Mr. Gumede's question, I will start by explaining what paragraph 31 in this document actually means. So the FAQ actually provide an explanation or guidance on how this provisioning is to be made. So what Transnet ought to have done in the advent of the PPA, at least, was to determine how much it would need at the end of the useful life of this particular pipeline for decommissioning of the DJP in this case. So what they did is they did the projection, but the projection was grossly lower than what it actually needs. This is why we're sitting with this dilemma at this point, is that the projection was grossly lower. This continued even with the annual reviews of the projections, because that's what Transnet does. They appoint a service provider to look at the issues of depreciation and land rehabilitation provision. So this we see as an oversight from Transnet's end in terms of properly estimating how much they would need for the decommissioning of this pipeline. With regards to issues of there being no legal provision prior or by the time the pipeline came into operation, I think we've tried to address that in the cover submission with that section on retrospective application of the law. And note that, Chairperson, what is normal for companies to do or for entities to do is that once there's a legal provision or a legal requirement or a legal obligation on their end for them to do such things, they normally raise an obligation or a liability in their balance sheet. So Transnet has done a similar exercise. However, the liability in itself was done 5 years late than when the NERSA came into effect. So those are the issues that were considered to get into to get to the recommendation that we are making, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I note that the issue of the funding of the shortfall, although not being what should be included in the tariff applications, it should be something that the team follows up with Transnet, which I must state also that so far they've proven to be a very cooperative licensee in terms of the requirements by the regulator, seeking to understand where we stand on this point. And the team has extensively engaged with them in this regard. I must also state that, for a pipeline that was commissioned in 1965, there was no legal obligation in the form of NEMA then, but there was a legal and moral obligation that still existed then as a liability for Transnet, because by and large the provision seeks to make it clear that people, the licensees or say companies do indeed rehabilitate and the money is set aside. I think most of us have also come to know about the problems of the acid mine water drainage problem in the country. And we don't want to have a similar situation here. Hence, this also highlights the need of workshopping licenses, that they get to understand what is required from their side. It shouldn't just be one workshop. I think we need to really go on an awareness and educational program in this regard, particularly also alerting prospective licensees or new entrants. So I think that is just important to understand. But having had the guidance as well as questions and responses thereto, may we then move towards the adopt the approval of the recommendation, which is as put on page 10 of 27, paragraph 41, where you see 41.1, 41.2, and 41.3. By show of hands, members, if you support the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Thank you, Madam Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Gumede.
Chairperson,
Yes,
I do approve and support, Chairperson, the recommendations, subject to my comment there that the team should at least have verified and give us assurance that the funds that we are requested to approve or recommend as of today will not affect what we have been allowing Transnet to put aside for the existence and utilization of the NMPP. They should not affect the funds that were put aside for the NMPP, because that's the facility that is in operation. So if there were no funds that were put aside, say in the past year or 2 years for DJP, we can't take from the other one. Otherwise, we'll be sitting with a similar problem in future. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. That is the ring fencing of those that are for the NMPP and the DJP, as well as I think all the comments that have been put forth. This recommendation is subject to that. I also note the issue of the periodic assessment. Yes, they've put the 5 years, but in your response, but do look at 3 years or so, noting the how things nowadays are so dynamic. But this recommendation is subject to all the comments that have been put forth during the meeting. So again, just just to be sure, by show of hands, if you support the recommendation, members, please. Thank you, Madam Maseti, Mr. Gumede, and Mr. Sibanda. Thank you. I also do support. Hence, then the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee does not approve the withdrawal of funds amounting to the 34 million. The PPS only approves the withdrawal of funds, available funds amounting to 32.6 million from the Transnet Pipelines Rehabilitation Trust for the decommissioning of the Durban to Johannesburg pipeline, and also approves the decision and reasons for decision document, which is attached as Annexure A, subject to the comments and enhancements put forth during the meeting. Thank you. We then proceed to item 8, guidelines on submission of volume reports and financial information by unincorporated joint ventures.
Thanks, Chair. Regarding receiving information from unincorporated joint venture partners. And thus I think it was the proposal from the PPS that we come up with guidelines on this issue. Mr. Bage will then highlight the important issues of these guidelines to assist in terms of receiving such information from these partners. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. The purpose of this submission is to request the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee to recommend to the Energy Regulator the approval of the guidelines document attached here to as Annexure A and the decision and reasons for decision document attached here to as Annexure B. Just to give a background of the reason behind this submission, in one of the subcommittee meeting, while discussing the submission of tariff applications that was lodged by unincorporated JV partners, the PPS members requested the PPR division to draft a submission indicating the challenges which are experienced with unincorporated JV partners and recommend the proposed solutions. The key concerns highlighted by the PPS members when considering the unincorporated JV partners tariff applications are highlighted on paragraph 7, page 4. As requested by the PPS members, the PPR division has highlighted the challenges experienced by the PPR when collating information from unincorporated JV partners, and the challenges are highlighted on paragraph 10, page 5. Our unincorporated JVs are not fully compliant when it comes to the submission of information required in terms of the RRMs, the submission of volumes reports, and the submission of financial information required for tariff applications. And the main reason given by the unincorporated JV partners for not complying fully with the conditions of their license pertaining to the submission of information was that the draft guidelines published by the Competition Commission of South Africa in respect of transactions involving unincorporated JV partners prohibit the sharing of financial information and the operational matters between unincorporated JV partners. Given that the unincorporated JV partners cited the Commission's guidelines prohibit them from sharing information, the energy regulator consulted the Commission with regard to the draft guidelines contained in the Commission's report in respect of a transaction involving unincorporated JV partners. And the Commission's advisory opinion on this matter is summarized on paragraph 18, page 7, whereby the Commission states that the decision in that guideline does not amount to a blanket prohibition of information sharing between unincorporated JV partners. Therefore, the decision cannot be used as a blanket defense for the unincorporated JV partners' lack of cooperation to NERSA's information request. They further stated that the information that does not constitute competitively sensitive information as well as historic information should be obtained from the unincorporated JV partners without any reluctance. And the information that is competitively sensitive should be limited to information relating to co-ownership of the unincorporated JV partners and not beyond that scope. So if information that is shared is deemed to be beyond the scope of the operation of the unincorporated JV partners, it will be permissible to share such information with NERSA through an independent third-party service provider. Considering the advisory opinion by the Competition Commission, the PPR division then consulted the affected stakeholders who are unincorporated JV partners licensed by NERSA with the view to confirm their understanding of the degree to which the parties to NERSA's unincorporated JV licenses may collate and share information with NERSA. So we have asked few questions to our licensed unincorporated JVs in order to get their view to help us coming up with solution to the problem. And the questions we asked the affected stakeholders and the comments or inputs from the affected stakeholders are summarized in the document attached here to as Annex B from page 26 to 36. Having considered the guidance provided by the Commission and the engagements we had with our affected stakeholders, the energy regulator recommends 3 options for our unincorporated JVs to share required information with NERSA. Out of these options, 1 option is still to be implemented. The first options, we are saying that the information that is competitively sensitive should be shared with NERSA through an independent third party or service provider, which they will collate and submit by an independent third party. And the second option, we are saying the facility operators shares the requested sensitive information with NERSA. In this regard, the operator undertakes not to exchange, disclose, or reveal any of the sensitive information received from other parties. And the last option, which is still to be implemented, we are saying each individual party or entity submits its information separately to NERSA. So this proposal will be applicable once NERSA has a system that will consolidate information. We have also drafted a guideline to provide guidance for the unincorporated JV partners regulated by NERSA in order to improve the state of compliance with NERSA's information request. Given all the recommended options and the guidelines drafted, it is therefore recommended that the PPS recommends to the ER approval of the guidelines document attached here to as Annex A and the decision and reasons for decision document attached here to as Annex B. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. May I then get any questions, comments, or guideline or guidance, sorry, from the members by show of hands? Mr. Kumete, then Mr. Sibanda.
Thanks, Chairperson. I just wanted to comment on page 8 of 9 that the options that are presented there, I was wondering to what extent have we considered the options, have we considered what was done by the DOE or what is being done by the DOE, who in fact in the liquid fuels industry are the ones that are regulating the industry in its totality. Because from what I understand is that DOE or Department DMRE now uses option 3. And if DMRE uses option 3, and I may be wrong, why can't we use the same option? So that was just that comment. Sorry, there was another one here. Should have been better to clearly indicate the choice. Oh, so what I was then saying, in the recommendation, the recommendation just simply it simply says the PPS recommends to the energy regulator approval of the guideline document that, it would be useful if whatever the actual decision in the guideline that is being sought is clearly indicated in the recommendation, so that at least as chairperson of the board has indicated that in terms of recommendation, they should be self-standing. That if somebody were to pick up and understand what is it that the actual what is it that the PPS actually the decision made by the PPS, one should be able to just read that recommendation and have a full understanding of what that recommendation is, rather than going into the whole annexure to get a feel in terms of what actually was the decision that was sought. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gumede. Mr. Sibanda.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, the guidelines are supported. Just a question also regarding option 3, which we have excluded in the final guidelines and the RFD. I just want to understand, what do we mean by saying that we are unable to receive information directly from licensees? NERSA currently does not have systems in place that will securely receive and collate information submitted by licensees. What exactly do we mean by that? And currently, how do we deal with this issue? Because in the responses by licensees, some of them are indicating that they do submit information separately or as individual licensees. So I was a bit confused as to what exactly do we mean by this particular issue or limitation here. Otherwise, I'm happy with the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sibanda. May you then respond with regard, particularly as you can see the questions mainly looking at option 3, the exclusion of option 3 for now. Why and can't it be included? If you may please respond.
Thank you, Chairperson. I will then start with Mr. Sibanda's question in terms of what do we really mean to say that we are unable to collate and receive information from individual JV partners, unincorporated JV partners, that is. So Chair, if you look at the nature of the information that we require from licensees or whose basis this particular submission is on, we require tariff applications from them, we require volume reports, we require audited regulatory financial statements. Chair. So with regards to tariff applications, a licensee actually has to tell NERSA how much for specifically for storage and loading facilities. They actually have to specify the tariff that they are applying for. So us receiving bits and pieces of information from the different parties to the unincorporated JV will make it impossible for the applicants to actually state the tariff that they're applying for NERSA's consideration. So that's why we felt that option 3 actually needs a bit of work and a bit of consolidation of systems and critiquing to a point where we can actually say that it can be immediately implemented. So it falls short on that front. Secondly, Chair, with regards to submission of volumes, option 3 can actually be used, but then we also encountered challenges wherein you'd find out that 2 of the parties to the JV comply, but the other party does not comply. So that whole facility for which the license is issued is actually non-compliant. This is why we feel like at this point it must be a responsibility of the unincorporated JV partners to ensure submission of information. So with regards to volumes, it falls short on that front. And then with regards to the auditing of financial reports, it is for the very same reason that you'd find out that the one party submits the audited information, but the other party does not submit. And maybe, Chair, coming to Mr. Gomede's question there, as to
maybe whilst you are there, before we proceed, I'd just like you to as you have responded, just to provide in terms of the tariff, what is stopping us from receiving an overall application which consolidate the tariffs, and then we get the individual ones, right? Such that your challenge is addressed, and then with regard to volume reports, why should it be a problem if the whole JV is deemed non-compliant? Because then it then pressurizes the other JV partners to talk to the non-compliant one to comply.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think with regards to tariff applications, our dilemma was with regards to whether we would be fully compliant with the law regarding approval of tariffs that are then submitted. Because if you look at that option, it means that NERSA would then put together a tariff application itself to get to the final tariff. And unless I didn't quite understand your question, Chair.
No, you kind of did not understand. What I'm saying is, you get the tariff application, which is consolidated, but in terms of you interrogating the figures, you still get to the individual submission, the individual details. That's what I was saying.
Oh, yes, Chair, that is possible. And I can confirm that that is what is actually happening with one of our JV facilities, NADCAs, where we got a tariff application from the operating partner, and then we sought additional information from the other parties. So that is possible, and it is something that we're currently doing.
So you see, it then says to me, you can have option 3 where applicable, because it's where applicable and possible.
Yeah.
But proceed then to respond to the issue of non-compliance too, and I would give you a chance to then finish off before I interject.
All right, Chair. And then do I now come to Mr. Gomede's questions? Are you covered with your follow-up questions, Chair?
No, I just wanted to understand the issue of compliance, because if maybe the head of Department for Compliance Licensing will assist. Mr. Untid.
Good morning, Chair and members. Yeah, I think it will be only fair for me to reply on this part. But I think Ms. Buku articulated it well, in the sense that it is possible. Maybe the choice of words was that we said it's not possible to receive it, and the emphasis on security is not the problem. It is more the concern that was raised from the participants, but we did now subsequently get the advisory advice from the Competition Commission, and on that basis, I agree or I concur. We will just have to implement it as PLC. That maybe we hold the managing partner, because they normally appoint a housekeeper or a managing partner, that party be kept responsible for the entire JV not complying, and that they then resolve between them to provide it to NERSA. We will implement that. That's
Thank you. You may proceed then, Madam Bogo.
Thank you, Chair. Proceeding to Mr. Gumede's questions. Chair, I think what has us fall short of what the DMRE can do in terms of implementing option 3 is, in my view, their very intelligent licensing system that is able to receive and collate information, which is something we as NERSA do not have at this juncture. So that's the reason that we can't, in my view, adopt option 3 like the DMRE is doing. And with regards to the recommendation, I think we will then include that or everything that is actually outlined in the decision part of the RFD. So that it is explicit of what the PPS is recommending to the ER. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you. I think you have already articulated the fact that option 3 is feasible under certain conditions where applicable, and the issue of a licensing system has been long put forth to the division to develop. So it's a question of the efficiency that comes with that system and not necessarily an impossibility. So members, I propose that option 3 be duly incorporated, noting the comments that have been put forth. So it's subject to those the conditions or being applicable and possible. And then also that we take it's recommendation 2.9.1 to talk to the guidelines document, which is attached as Annexure A, and then combine it with paragraph 21. Underneath, we then have to say that using the following approaches, then we're saying option 1, 2, and 3 to be included in that recommendation. If you support that stance, and the guidelines will also be amended to fall in line with that with this recommendation and circulated amongst the members, should it be approved. If you do approve that approach, if you may just show by raising hand. Thank you, Madam Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Thank you, Mr. Gumede.
Chairperson,
yes.
Could I still ask just a summary of what you are saying in those guidelines? Just a summary. What exactly are we as the PPS actually approving? And this is going to be for the benefit of ER, by the way. Whatever the question I'm asking, if you don't summarize it properly here, you get exactly the same comment at ER.
Okay, I was still going to read through what I'm recommending. What we will be recommending is paragraph 21 being incorporated into paragraph 29.1. So I was just going to read it after, but let me read maybe after so you understand. It is recommended that the PPS recommends to the energy regulator approval of the guidelines document attached here to as Annexure A, right, which recommends the following approaches, which adopts the following approaches, right? Then it's option 1, information that is competitive sensitive should be shared with NERSA through an independent third party or service provider, collated and submitted by independent third party. The unincorporated JV partners may sign a non-disclosure agreement with the independent third party. Option 2, the facility operator shares the requested sensitive information with NERSA. In this regard, the operator undertakes not to exchange, disclose, and or reveal any of the sensitive information received from other parties or party. Then option 3, each individual party, where practicable and feasible, each individual party or entity submits its information separately to NERSA. This this proposal will be further enhanced by NERSA developing a system to consolidate information. Are you fine with that then, Mr. Kumete?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then the second recommendation will be the decision for the energy regulator to approve the decision and reasons for decision document, which is attached here to as Annexure B. This RFD is going to be amended accordingly. So, having said that, by show of hands, once again, just to make sure that we are all on the same page, if you do support the approval. Thank you, Madam Maseti. Thank you, Mr. Sbanda. Thank you, Mr. Kumede. So and it's recommended to the energy regulator for approval. We then go to item 9, which is the Transnet multi-product pipeline prudency review final report. Mr. Dr. Polo.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. The submission is to request the Petroleum Pipelines Subcommittee to recommend for the energy regulator to approve the final report on the Transnet multi-product pipeline prudency review. Before I just present the report, I would like to make 2 corrections. Two annexures, which are Annexure 7 and 8, they appear after.
Interject.
You may come in, Mr. Kumete.
Chairperson, the report that is before us is got confidential read all over the show. Now, the question I asked, that being the case, and I must admit I came in the middle of that discussion you were having with RSU in terms of guidance. Should this report therefore be discussed in this platform, or should be discussed in a closed session?
Thank you. If you may please advise Mr. Chokwe in terms of whether we should invoke Section 8(9) of the National Energy Regulator Act in this regard.
Chairperson, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Chairperson, the rule on confidentiality is that we have to err on the side of caution, in the sense that the test that we use there, Chairperson, is if the information that is before this committee could reasonably be expected actually maybe to be putting the licensee or the applicant in a disadvantage, or in a disadvantage in contractual or prejudice him or her, Chairperson. My issue on this one is that we don't actually take matters on confidentiality, the whole issue. We take the essence, I mean the aspects of the submission or the application that can actually that are confidential. And I've talked to Ms. Mtwa on the side to say we can actually on the numbers on the numbers, we may actually treat those as confidential, but I'm not confident to say the whole submission can be discussed in this meeting, Chairperson, but the aspects of the submission that are confidential are the ones that have to be protected, because normally when we don't discuss a matter before the committee is when the applicant has requested that the whole issue it's confidential. But in terms of the PAIA Act, it's not the whole issue. It should be those issues, maybe on commercial information. We'll be talking trade secrets. We'll be talking financial, commercial, scientific, or technical information. We might be talking all those issues that can actually compromise or actually disadvantage the licensed. My advice, Chairperson, is that I am not comfortable to say the whole matter should be discussed confidential in a confidential mode. I would say the aspects that are confidential should be, but indeed, if maybe they are just all over the place, then maybe it has to be redone and actually be done in a proper way. But my advice, Chairperson, would say, if we can't separate the confidential issues from the whole matter, then we can. But we have to err on the side of protecting either the applicant or the licensee rather than ourselves. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you. Members, just want to hear from you by show of hands if you support the invoking of section 8.9 in terms of discussing this matter by not in the public domain.
Chair?
Yes, Madam Seti.
Chair, maybe you need to take the first advice from Mr. Chokwe, where he indicated that only certain sections of the submission may not be divulged during the presentation and also during the deliberations. However, if then the deliberations are likely to touch on the commercially sensitive information, and it is inevitable that we will get to the final decision without considering that commercially sensitive information, then maybe we could invoke section 8.9. And if so, Chairperson, just for the smooth proceedings, since we are live on the social media platforms, if then we opt for this option of invoking section 8.9, I would rather then suggest that we then move this agenda item towards the end before we start considering the minutes, so that we don't have to ask stakeholders that are following these proceedings to sign off the call and then come back on the other matters that are still on the agenda. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you. Maybe I kind of short-circuit the process, but I was looking at it from a point of just efficiency with time, because when what Mr. Gumede was actually saying was that for him it is difficult to separate the issues that are confidential from parts that are non-confidential, and in the discussions we might find ourselves stumbling upon what is confidential coming through into the public domain. Hence, that was what I heard. Then I heard Mr. Chokwe saying that the two may be separated. So just on the strength of what the two comments have come through, I thought then the members would then exercise their judgment in terms of what needs to be done. Where I'm sitting as a chairperson, that there's just that high risk that some of the things that are confidential are actually embedded in the whole document, to the extent that there could be a risk of talking to issues, and to holistically and intelligently engage on the document will be very difficult if it is in the public domain, because to deliberate on certain issues, one might have to touch on what is confidential. Mr. Kumete, I see your hand is up. If you may just respond.
Chairperson, may I just request that we err on the side of caution and discuss this at the end, as Madam Aseti has indicated, and we discuss it in a closed session. That would be my request, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Sibanda?
Chairperson, I withdraw my comment. Thanks. Okay, I would just like then the members again to indicate by show of hands if they support that this meeting be close to this item be discussed in a closed session. To us, as we've said, that is going to, we're also going to move it towards the end of this meeting. If you can just show by raising hands if you support that. Thanks, Madam Aseti. Mr. Kumete, thank you. Mrs. Banda, thank you. So in terms of section 8, subsection 9, this of the National Energy Regulator Act, this item 9, which is the Transnet Multi-Product Pipeline Prudency Review final report, will be discussed in a session that is close to the public. And then we also going to move it just to come prior to item 14, which entails the minutes and matters arising from the previous meetings. Then we'll proceed then to item 10, which is the review of the petroleum pipelines regulations.
Chairperson, it is the review of the petroleum pipelines regulation licensing guidelines. We have had a look at this, and Ms. Munyebedi will take us through on the proposed updated areas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you, Ms. Ntwa. Morning, colleagues and members. The proposed licensing guidelines form part of our internal improvement processes, but they are also being reviewed due to some of the gaps that have been identified during the almost 5 years of them being in effect. So in essence, the proposed guidelines seek to lessen the difficulty of satisfying some of the requirements, to reduce the one-size-fits-all scenario of licensing requirements by attempting to customize some of the requirements for the different types of licenses, and also introduce information related to amendment and revocation applications, which is presently not covered in the current guidelines. And finally, it also seeks to expand on other aspects such as the tariff, which were noted as not being well covered by applicants, and also just for standardization, even for the processing analysts. So, so the manner in which these proposals were made was through internal consultation within PPR, where we collectively discussed our observations and learnings from having processed license applications and the kind of questions that are usually asked in the decision-making process. We also relied on the pipe gas legislation in terms of comparability, and externally we gathered more facts by participating in Dr. Siavuya's project, where NERSA met and is still meeting with several financial institutions on the funding of emerging players in the petroleum industry. In terms of the key proposals and rationale for their inclusion, these are presented in Table 1 on page 4. There are 8 main changes that we are proposing, but I'll discuss the 4 core ones which address the tariff aspect, the financial ability section, and the new sections relating to amendments and revocation. So for the tariff section, we have brought this section forward in the guidelines to highlight that every license application for an operation license must be accompanied by a tariff application in line with our current rules, because previously tariff applications were only required within 6 months after the issuance of a license. We have also included a requirement for the proposed financial security for land rehabilitation, including an outline of the procedure for the approval, the withdrawal, and the transfer of that financial security. The second core proposal relates to the satisfaction of the financial ability of the applicant. So the financial ability section is broken down into 2 parts. It's the anticipated project performance and the financing and financial position. And these can be found on page 57 of the document. Under the aspect of project performance, the key element that we have proposed here is that the letters or the expressions of interests should be acceptable to NERSA in the case where firm offtake agreements are not in place. And the basis we used here is that the assessment or the determination of whether there is a need for a proposed facility still somewhat lies with NERSA, and that NERSA has or should have an overview of the infrastructural needs and forecasts and use that information at its disposal to establish that need for infrastructure. This of course will be in addition to the forecast model which will be submitted by the applicant. Our view here really was that the letters or expressions of interest would then play the role of indicating whether there is appetite in the market for the proposed infrastructure or at least potential to uptake the use of that infrastructure. With regards to the financing aspect, what we are proposing here is that rather than requesting firm funding, that we accept letters of interest as well to fund on the basis that the said letters should at least indicate the amount to be funded. And the reason we made this proposal is because we learned through engaging with funders and investors that the strength of these letters of interest differs, and that most likely where the amount requested is stipulated in the said letter, then it shows that the funder's due diligence would have been at least at a mid to advanced stage, rather than at initial stage where very little engagement or due diligence has been done by the funder. But over and above this, we are also proposing that for indicating the applicant's financial position, rather than requesting all the specific listed items as is currently being done, that we rather request a combination of the listed items as applicable. These are also indicated on the table on page 57. With regards to the section relating to revocation and amendment applications on page 61 and 63, what we have done here is because the application forms are not quite explicit on the information that is required for the different scenarios, we have outlined the necessary information based on the different reasons provided for needing the amendment or revocation. So some of the scenarios include whether the licensee is amending commencement or completion dates of construction, whether they are adding or removing capacity, or whether they are converting their infrastructure. And for other cases, whether the facility is being mothballed, which would then sort of warrant a suspension of license conditions, for example. And lastly, Chairperson, we have added a section that is not necessarily specified in the rules, but is information that is often required, such as the employment created and justification of project costs and usefulness of the infrastructure, which is information that we usually use in the prudency assessments. With that said, Chairperson, I am recommending that the PPS make a recommendation to ER to approve the proposed petroleum pipelines regulation licensing guidelines as attached in Annexure 1C. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Munyibedi. Members, any questions, comments, or guidance by show of hands? Madam Massetti.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the presentation. Chairperson, on the first change that is proposed, where the what is it on the operation license that should be accompanied by the tariff application. Let's just be certain that it will not raise other administrative processes and the capacity of the licensee to come up with both those applications at the same time, but also it means we must also adjust our own processes from NERSA with regards to just to ensure that there will be coordination between the processing of such operation license with the assessment of the tariff that is sought for the operation license. So it means there must be a proper coordination there and checking of the information and just the processes and the sequencing of the decisions with regards to such tariff application as well as the operation license. So we just need to make sure that we look at their processes carefully, but also in respect of instances where what is it? In instances where the operation license is sought before construction of the facility is completed, how do you then deal with the issue of the tariff? Because you might then determine that tariff, say a year or even 2 years in advance. And then what will happen, there will be some escalation. And will that not then result in some unintended consequences when it comes to the final tariff to the consumer? So we also need to look into that, and even other adjustments that would be required on that tariff by the time the facility is commissioned, and then the tariff is charged from the third parties or from the consumer. Have we thoroughly considered that implication on this thing that we are proposing? Because it will have such implications. So we need to look carefully into that. With regards to the escalation and adjustments that may need to be made on that tariff, should the operation license and the tariff be approved 2 years or 1 year or 3 years in advance, as we don't have control over the licensee completing the construction of the facility. And we know from experience that that on its own can be a challenge. So we just need to be careful about that one, and maybe we can get some response from the team on that, how they will try and ameliorate the risk of a huge adjustment on the tariff, such that that tariff then would not even materialize, the one that would have determined 2 years, 3 years, 5 years before the commissioning of the facility. And the second one, Chairperson, is on proof of authorization. With regards to proof of authorization, I'm just worried about us lowering the standard here without thoroughly considering the risk associated with the lowering of the standard. When I say lowering the standard, I'm referring to the instance where we do need to have or to ascertain that the person who applies for a license does have the necessary authority to apply for that license on behalf of the entity concerned. Now, this does not mean that such entities or any entity that applies to NERSA for a license must have boards, you know, as now is indicated in the justification. But what we need to make sure from our side is that the person has the necessary authority to apply for this license. How do we then make sure that there are no risks when it comes to that with the change that is proposed here? And then, Chairperson, lastly, from my side, it relates to number 4 on the administrative abilities, where we now endorse the inclusion of an agreement with a third party. And I'm just wondering whether such a process is really necessary for us to do, because the licensee may just decide that it may come up or may request some assistance even with the operation of a pipeline, for instance, because that will have some financial implications, especially by the banks in terms of the risk, looking at the expertise of the person who will be operating a pipeline. But in this instance, we need to take into consideration the costs arising from this arrangement that we are now endorsing, or we are required to endorse of a third party that can be included by way of an agreement. Did we take into account now the cost that will arise, and that cost will have to be recovered from a tariff, as we have now becoming clear in our own guidelines that we will include something like that. So if we recognize that, we must understand that we also recognize the cost that will be associated with that. Is that something that we would like to do? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Tim, if you may just respond and be to the point, noting that we are now about 55 minutes to our time for closure of meeting. Mr. Untid?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll start off and then Ms. Munyaburi can assist. So I think Ms. Maseti's question with regards to the tariff matter, it's currently the revised rules 2090 already requires the tariff application to be made. But unfortunately, when we updated the rules, we didn't update the guidelines. So in a way, we just aligning the guidelines now also with what was already approved in the last rule change, which require a license, a tariff application, either 6 months before it is due to take effect because of the processing of the tariff process, or then at the time of the tariff application. We already, Ms. Maseti, already have been practicing this. Again, it's just the rule or the guidelines being aligned. So and you are correct, we duly note your concern about the processes, but I think we have been managing it well, and we currently have processed 2 such in very recent times, and I think we're busy processing another one. So it does require great coordination, but I think the 2 departments, we invite them to the pre-meetings and we have aligned. So yes, we note your concern and we will think about that carefully, but yeah, we are currently doing it, and I think we have been successful as long as it's coordinated well, like you've indicated. Note your concern about the construction facilities. Again, the regulator took a decision that no longer can construction and operation licenses be approved at the same time, if I can put it that way, at the beginning. But the construction license is issued as the project progresses, they will come typically 6 months before they need that to take effect. Or I think you are familiar with that in some cases then they come and say they need certain to convert the equity into loans, and then they will come with that request. But it's typically 6 months before it needs to take effect. So I think in a way we have mitigated that. Maybe I'm not sure, Ms. Munyabodi, if you can assist. I heard a question about boards and the third-party costs. I don't have an answer now. I will think maybe while she assists me.
Okay, thank you, Martin. With regards to the question on the proof of authorization, so currently what we have been accepting is board resolution to support the proof of authorization for third parties to make the application. But over and above that, in the actual rules, there is a section E where there is a solemn declaration by the applicant or mandated representative. And as part of that solemn declaration, you would have to attach the actual authorization. So what we are asking here is that this authorization not just us recognize a board resolution, but also a letter from the actual applicant should be sufficient. And then on the aspect of administrative abilities, what we are actually asking here is that when applicants specify that this is the third party that will be assisting us with the construction or whatever activities that we'll be undertaking, that they actually provide proof of that as part of the application, because usually it's just a statement that we will be utilizing Pilar Munyabodi's company, but there's no proof of that. So the agreement is sort of to satisfy that aspect. I do acknowledge the point regarding the cost, that maybe we can consider something, maybe a letter or not per se an agreement entered into. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for the responses. I think it is important that you highlight the issue of the rules and this following the promulgation of the amended rules. And then two, that under HR implications, you need to include the issue of people and systems in line with the coordination aspects and the sequencing of decision. I think it's addressed in terms of the rules. Also, just be very clear that we don't have indicative tariffs now. We just go to the tariff itself. So that deals with the issue of also the sequencing in terms of construction, then operating license together with the tariff application. And then when it comes to the proof of authorization, just to emphasize that you then have to scrutinize that with regard to the organizational structure and also as to the body that is granting that authority to that individual and the proof of that authority being indeed granted. And with regard to third party, it will also be the scrutiny to the cost of bringing that third party on board. I think that there's a kind of enhancement that you need to make on the submission, going to ER should this be supported by the members. Members, if you support the recommendation, may you please just indicate by show of hands. The recommendation is on page 8 of 82. By show of hands. Thank you, Madam Massetti. Thank you, Mr. Kumete. Thank you, Mr. Sbanda. I also support the recommendation. So it is then recommended by this Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee that the energy regulator approves the proposed Petroleum Pipelines Regulation Licensing Guidelines as version 4 of 2022, which is attached here to as Annex 1C. Thank you. This then closes this matter, and we proceed to item 11, decision and reasons for decision on the review of the tariff methodology for petroleum storage and loading facilities. Madam Bobo and the team.
Chairperson, maybe before they come in, it's just to remind the members that we have been piloting the tariff methodology as a version 4.1, and we have submitted to the PPS a number of reports in that regard, and we have done certain studies to try and support the review of the methodology, which were also submitted to the PPS. We have now come up with the version, the draft version of 5 of the methodology that we would like to publish for public comment. So Ms. Yokano will just take us through the highlights of the methodology and what has been the main changes. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members and colleagues. The purpose of the submission, as mentioned by Ms. Mtwa, is to request the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee to, 1, note the draft version 5 of the tariff methodology for petroleum storage and loading facilities attached here to as Annexure A. 2, to note the draft decision on the review of the tariff methodology attached here to as Annexure B, and 3, to approve that the energy regulator consults stakeholders on the draft decision, including the preliminary provision for the efficiency adjustment factor in the tariff methodology for approval of tariffs for the petroleum storage and loading facilities, which is attached here to as Appendix 1. Now, in terms of the background and or rationale, in the 2019-2020 financial year, NERSA embarked on the process of reviewing the tariff methodology for the approval of tariffs for petroleum loading and storage facilities, which was necessitated by the need to optimally advance the objects of the Act, whilst addressing the challenges that were encountered with versions 2 and 3 of the methodology. Therefore, the areas of review and refinement were identified based on the challenges as well as unintended consequences encountered with the various versions of the methodology approved and implemented by the energy regulator. The following are the revised components of the methodology, which will make the draft version 5 different from version 4 in the previous versions. The deferred tax component has been removed in the regulatory asset base formula to align to the flow-through tax allowance. Secondly, the assets that are fully depreciated but are yet still in use are not included in the regulatory asset base formula. In the net working capital formula, the minimum cash balance component has been removed as the operating cash is deemed to serve the same purpose. The risk-free rate as well as the market risk premium will be estimated based on the data for the preceding 3 months instead of the previous 360 months rather. And the cost of equity determination formula was amended, mainly focusing on the additional risk adjustment parameters. An additional emphasis is placed on accuracy in predicting costs as well as justifications of the links between all itemized operating costs and the production or supply of the regulated service. The flow-through tax will be the only tax approach to be used in the allowable revenue determination formula. And lastly, the draft version 5 will introduce the provision for efficiency benchmarking through the implementation of volume rules. It is therefore recommended that the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee notes the draft version 5 of the tariff methodology for petroleum storage and loading facilities attached here to as Annexure A. Notes the draft decision on the review of the tariff methodology for petroleum storage and loading facilities attached here to as Annexure B, and approves that the energy regulator consults stakeholders on the draft decision, including the preliminary provision for the efficiency adjustment factor in the tariff methodology for the approval of tariffs for petroleum storage and loading facilities attached here to as Appendix 1. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Yogwane. Any questions, comments, and guidance from the members? By show of hands, please. Mr. Gumede, sir.
Thank you, Chairperson. I've got an overarching comment here, and maybe, Chairperson, I still need guidance on this. Section 4F of the Petroleum Pipelines Act is very clear that the energy regulator must set or approve tariffs in a manner prescribed by regulation. So I'm really struggling, Chairperson, with what is NERSA's role in developing a methodology, unless I'm reading that section incorrectly, that says, shouldn't this methodology be prescribed? And I don't see any other section in the Act that empowers through rules for elaborating this methodology further or whatever. I'm just, Chairperson, I'm truly struggling with this particular one. That's the first concern. But on a more direct comment, I think firstly, I think the changes that are proposed are clear. I just have one on page 20 of 29, or page 31 of 204. That for me, the one issue that, especially on the volumes, is that I think the biggest issue, other than cost overruns and also all of that can be tested in terms of what we do in terms of prudency, as in terms of this particular decision that has been deferred for later to consider under in a closed session, is that the major other thing that consumers are concerned about or should be concerned about, it's the volume variation. Is that I note the spiral output efficiency that was presented last time, the volume rules as it is called. But I think for me, if we wanted to look back to when this particular, say I know that this one is actually in respect of storage, but in terms of the original thinking around pipelines, is that the issue was meant to be about capacity and the utilization of those capacities, in which case the regulator would not necessarily be concerned about whether they actually are the sales are happening on that tank or not, and the impact on the tariff, but would be about more concerned about how the particular facility is performing against what it was intended to perform in terms of what was its design capacity and the expected or could be benchmarked utilization rate. Shouldn't we be moving more towards that? I'm assuming that NERSA has the powers to set this tariff, which I must admit to to actually set the actual methodology, which I must admit I'm struggling with, and I just need to have guidance. But in the event that we do, should we not be, I think, as an organization, be moving more towards capacity and its utilization rather than sales volumes, which are very variable by their very nature. But that's not how the world, I'm talking about in terms of how people that are operating in the private sector, that's not how you actually set a tariff or a price. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gumede. Then Ms. Maseti, Madam.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I only have one question. I note the changes, some of them are quite new and they are intended to improve efficiencies and our due diligence in assessing these applications. However, on matters that were the subject of a project of the regulator involving the 3 regulatory divisions in terms of harmonizing tariff approaches, particularly on issues pertaining to tax approach and risk-free rate and the others. I just want to check with the proposed changes, to what extent are these changes align to that tariff harmonization project? Are we making progress with the proposed changes, or some of these changes on these issues that I've touched on, and some of them are in the document? Are we taking a slightly different approach from what that tariff harmonization report proposed? This is just also to see to what extent are we moving towards harmonization. And this is not to say that we shouldn't change or make changes that will suit the industry, the specific industry, if that works for that industry and we see that it brings some benefits. It's not to say that we shouldn't do so, but it will help to understand what progress we are making, to the extent that we can't get closer to what we want to achieve because of legislation and because of the benefits. That can also be noted even when we deal with that project again. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Maseti. I think before the team responds, it's important that something comes out very clearly. We had undertaken a process of piloting instead of just going straight and implement. And then it was envisaged that post-piloting, there will be implementation. But I think is that what came out very clear is that there is, because of changes that have been experienced, particularly when it comes to the efficiency issues around forums, which Mr. Gumede also touched on, is that these volume rules, we then need to engage the licenses thereon, so that we can then come up with a tariff mechanism that is holistic and exhaustive, to the extent that it will be implemented without a lot of teething problems. So I think that should be emphasized, as also in the recommendation, the part C of the recommendation talks to that issue of consulting stakeholders. So I just want to emphasize that and make it clear to the members that it's not like post March 31st, then we are going to be having these implemented as they are right now. I will then leave it to the team to respond with regard to the harmonization, as well as the authority. Legal, if you can just come in and assist the last, as well as the issue of the volume rules. But I see that Ms. Kimutsa, who has also contributed in a lot of research papers that will go into these this tariff review. If you may just comment there.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to provide a contribution to the issues that Mr. Gumede has just raised. What has happened is that the issue of volume rules arise as a result of a general observation that there were good grounds, in fact, to suspect that some of the licensees, as they apply for tariff applications, could be manipulating, volumes. For instance, that they would deliberately suppress volumes in order to justify, higher tariff regimes. And in some cases, that was actually invoking volatility, especially, when they would say these are projected volumes and therefore they are only forecasting as they cannot be very sure of what is going to happen, in the future. Of course, we would agree, with such economic sentiments on the basis that, the market that we are dealing with is quite dynamic. And then it would then lead to, in some cases where they would then start inventing, ways of applying, mechanisms of methodology to justify, the tariffs that they would be applying. For example, using discounting factors on volumes, which is a principle that we would not even justify in literature or even in regulatory practice. So that's how this aspect of volume rules, came into picture, and the manner in which it is presented in the document that Ms. Yokwana has just presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Yokwana and your team, please respond.
Thank you, Chair. I just like to talk to the issue relating to the requirement of the methodology, referring members to section 28, subsection 2 of the Petroleum Pipelines Act, which states that the tariff charged in terms of subsection 1 must be based on a systematic methodology applicable on a consistent and comparable basis. So that is where we got this requirement for us to have a methodology. I hope that answers Mr. Gumede's question, Chair. And then I can already also touch on this question by Ms. Maseti and confirm that the recommendations emanating from the harmonization projects carried out by RAR have been implemented. This is why we are now making changes, relevant changes to the determination of the tax rate, Chair. So thank you.
Thank you, Nobu and Isaac. On the issue of the volume, the capacity and utilization versus the sales volumes, we did find that this approach of the efficiency adjustment factor will contribute towards the promotion of efficient and effective use of the storage facilities, whilst at the same time promoting competition, especially through the third-party access, and ultimately that will lead towards the better access for the HDI firms that are just recently accessing the petroleum's industry. That's towards the question by Mr. Gumede. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Rar, may you please just confirm the issue of the tariff harmonization project being incorporated in this regard and progress, just very briefly, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I can also confirm that our recommendations have been incorporated by the PPT team. We presented a report, I think it was sometime in June, that indicated excuse me, progress in terms of the implementation of the recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. With those responses, you then need to also enhance the submission just to make sure that these things come out very clear. Talk to the authority in terms of the development of the methodology and the application thereof. Talk to the issue of volume rules, the facilities performing according to their, in line with their design capacities. That is the issue of effectiveness and efficiency, and the harmonization project. So with that, members being duly incorporated in the submission, will we then go to the approval, to the recommendation, which is on page 11 of 204. By show of hands, if you support that recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Thank you, Mr. Gumede. Madam Maseti. Thank you, Madam Maseti.
I support Chairperson.
Yes.
I support Chairperson, and I raised just one more issue with regards to implementation, because we must have some timeline with regards to implementation, because we had a different version of the pilot project, which ran for a year or so, or more than a year. And now we are developing another version of the methodology still for pilot purposes. I think we do need to now talk about the implementation, because these decisions would not have impact on the industry per se if they are not implemented. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I see Mr. Gumede's hand is still, well, there's a lingering hand, or wanted to say something?
I wanted to say something, Chair. What I'm saying is that I support the recommendations, Chair, but I must admit, I think for me, I've read that section 28, but you know, my concern with them in terms of the law is, and this is going to be something, and something that we need to take offline, but the issue that we should not give ourselves powers we don't have. The fact that there's a mention, if it was intended, if the lawmakers intended that methodology to have been done by way of a rule or whatever, it would have so indicated. But I think for me, we need to actually take this seriously, just in case somebody takes us to court and ask us the fundamental question: where do you draw that power in terms of the Act? Because all our powers are drawn from the Act. That's number one. Number two, I'm not entirely convinced by the issue of that of those volume rules. I think let's engage further, because clearly for me, I really do want to believe that, you know, there must be something that more standardized that can be used by NERSA that protects consumers from the potential abuse by licensees. Thank you. But I do support Chairperson. Thanks.
Thank you. I note that. I just want to check before we proceed. Madam Toa and your team, maybe RSU, is it the approval from this committee or the approval from ER?
Chairperson, you mean in terms of the publication that we are sorting on this item? We were hoping that we'll get an approval to do the public consultation, and then later, which is around March, April, then we take it to ER for final approval. And in terms of the implementation, we are targeting May to publish the final draft for the implementation. So there will be no further piloting on this one. And as it emanates from 4.1, it's just that because now we see it as a final product that we can implement. It's now officially version 5. So we will then looking into implementing it by May this year, 2022, sir. And then maybe in terms of the consent from Mr. Gumede, maybe we'll then, this process will allow us to further engage while the process is still on publication, also internally to continue the discussion on volume rules. And then when we finalize the document for ER approval, we'll first take it back, we'll bring it back here for PPS before taking to ER. So maybe then the month of February, can we use it to further engage on this and see how we reach a final document for publication? Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, members have already indicated their approval of the recommendation. So I also support the recommendation. So the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee notes the draft version 5 of the tariff methodology for petroleum storage and loading facilities, which is attached here to as Annex A, notes the draft decision on the review of the tariff methodology for petroleum storage and loading facilities as attached here to as Annex B. It also approves that the energy regulator consults stakeholders on the draft decision, including the preliminary provision for the efficiency adjustment factor in the tariff methodology for the approval of tariffs for petroleum storage and loading facilities, which is attached as Appendix 1, subject to the incorporation of all the comments and enhancement put forth during the meeting, including the issue of having indicated timelines in terms of the implementation. Thank you. Let's move to item 12, which is a report, investigation into the complaint by Transnet SOC Limited in terms of Section 31 of the Petroleum Pipelines Act against Sasol Oil and Total SA. Madam Chair and the team.
Chairperson, Mr. Riba is currently on leave and Mr. Untit has agreed to assist in this matter. It is an enhanced report from the discussion that we have early in December, and we've tried to address the matters that were raised by PPS members. Mr. Untit, please come in.
Thank you, EM and members. So as indicated, the enhancements is basically listed in the table in the document, and therefore all the other information listed in paragraphs 4 and 5 is basically a repeat of that. So the deliberations by PPS is the table in paragraph 6, table 1. And basically, I think many of those is self-explanatory, but I think questions, we've given the management response. If the members need further clarity, then maybe in the interest of time, they can then deal with the respective ones. But in general, I think the enhancements are listed there in the document, which was the main concern that the members had. But in terms of just highlighting one or two, jurisdiction of NERSA was one of the key themes, and I think that we tried to address. Legal advisory services assisted us to enhance that section, paragraph 6.2 to 6.8 on page 7. In terms of the court case and the matter before us, so we've added that statement in the document. The explanation between the differences between the matter before us is maybe the legal colleagues can assist, but Lispender's rule is not applicable, and that's explained in the document. And I think then the enhancements of 5 and 7, which was units, questions of clarity, that has been provided in the document. So in the interest of time, I'm not sure if there's any other questions, but in summary, the scope of the complaint, based on the questions the members had and the clarification, effectively now reduces, because some of the matters does form part of the court proceedings, and there's already been rulings in terms of discrimination and differentiation. So in that case, there's been rulings, but the scope now will narrow down as being, I think, summarized in paragraph 6.8. The first part of the complaint that Transnet submitted in its original form basically has been dealt with, and therefore the scope of our investigation as approved by the PPS in the inception report has been narrowed down in terms of what tariff is actually being charged, because that is a function of NERSA. So with that said, the recommendation to the committee is to note the enhanced reports, but then subject to further questions that may arise from members now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Umtit. Any questions, comments, or guidance? And please indicate if you are happy to note. Mr. Kumete.
Thanks, Chairperson. On this one again, I must admit, I'm raising concerns. We had asked for these agreements to be availed, and we thought would be attached here too for the members of the regulator of PPS to be able to make an informed decision. I note that it says that they are actually available in the reading room, which I must admit I couldn't find. Maybe it's just me again not searching properly, but nonetheless, it makes it very difficult, I think, for us to make a decision. And the question for me that then arises is that to the extent to which courts have pronounced on this, there are court decisions, yes, being appealed and so forth. And without an indication in terms of the law that says, for instance, in respect of the Electricity Regulation Act, there's a clear stipulation that the only tariff that can be charged in Table 15.2, that the only tariff that can be charged is that is set by the regulator. But set or approved by the regulator. But in this particular case, I don't know if there is a similar provision. If there is, it would be useful that it be highlighted, and therefore would raise a question of why did NERSA not defend that position when this matter came before court? Because it then raises a question that if the courts have found that those particular agreements, variation agreements and whatever, are binding on the licensee, what room does NERSA actually have to even, what is it that we can invoke that gives us the powers to actually differ with those findings? But I think for me the key issue is honestly about being able to see what documents were presented to the courts, and for us to then be able to make an informed decision on whether is there still scope for us to actually do anything in this regard. I take the cue. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kumede. May you please respond? Mr. Umtit?
Thank you, Chair, and apologies. I just had to silence the services here. Yeah, Mr. Gumede, I was in the impression that those documents were uploaded into the reading room. I don't have access to board pack, and I'm not sure if Ms. Masengwani can assist us in that regards. In terms of that, maybe I didn't articulate it properly, but we have excluded the parts. Your concern about we pronounce NERSA pronouncing on something which the courts has already done. They are a specific commercial or certain element that the courts is pronounced on, and therefore our function as a regulator, similar to the previous report that served today, what's the actual tariffs charged by licensees? This is effectively the check, if I can put it in layman's language, that that the scope of the investigation is now being narrowed down to. So there's still problems there in terms of the actual formula. That is indeed in that documents, Mr. Gumede, and maybe we can email it if the reading room is a problem. But we did get those documents. The one is literally a letter, if you can put it that way, and in the court proceedings which I followed, that came up several times, that this is just a 2 or 3 page letter, that the further details had to be developed in a way is part of what the court discussions were. But in essence, we're not going to be straying onto what courts is announced or pronounced on. This will be more to check the actual tariffs and the allegation that they're not paying what the NERSA tariff is. For us to assess that, there was some problems in terms of confidential treatment of information, and NERSA couldn't share the information. Transnet has committed that they will continue now with the two parties to share the information directly, that in terms of that, and then it resolves the problem about NERSA. So in the subsequent letters, which came in literally while this document was signed off, that was also supposed to be placed in the reading room in the last day or so, where they now actually give us some indications of how they arrive at the actual tariff for NERSA then as a regulator to compare what was approved by NERSA in this year and what was actually charged. So I'm not sure if I've answered your concerns, Mr. Gumede.
Chairperson, I would not
yes.
want to hold the meeting back, and really all I'm asking is that, for instance, a number of those documents I do have, but I obtained them during my tenure at the department, and therefore I can't use them in this platform. So it would be useful to actually get them officially as part of this submission. But I think for me, Chairperson, it's going to be important for us to be able to have a good understanding and a good analysis for us that says, even on the issue that we are maybe asked to adjudicate on, to what extent do we as the NERSA have authority if the courts have said, for instance, whatever private agreements that were made are still binding despite the actual promulgation of the Petroleum Pipelines Act. We need that guidance, Chairperson, to be able to guide the committee properly. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Noting that, Madam Masangai, I note that you said the documents, the two documents were loaded. I don't know if you want to add anything, but noting that we are now most likely to overrun the meeting, I would just request that if we proceed, we don't go beyond 12:30, if that is acceptable to you members. But having said that, I think Mr. Gumede and all the members is that this being a progress report, it will be important for the team to incorporate all the comments that have been made, particularly around the issues of jurisdiction. What are we actually dealing with? The issues of the documents, and you are at liberty to verify the documents, as well as the court judgments and proceedings, summary of proceedings. But the court judgments in particular, if you have them, you have those attached, so that it will help in terms of members really having an overview of what this complaint entails and how best to handle it going forward, because it will also set some kind of precedence for further complaints. The issue of the legal powers that we have in dealing with this case and what legal arguments are being dealt with should come out very clear in the subsequent progress report. And having said that, members, noting this as a progress report. Are you happy then to note this report by show of hands, subject to the incorporation of these comments in subsequent reports? Thank you, Mr. Gumede, Madam Maseti, Mr. Sibanda. I also do support the noting. May we then proceed to item 13?
Chair?
Yes.
Chairperson, may I request that before the next report, can we also have a workshop so that we can, because there will be a lot of issues with regard to this complaint, as you correctly indicated that it will set a precedent. So could we then perhaps have a workshop so that we manage our time during the meetings well on matters like these, where they are likely to generate a robust discussion? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. I take it as part of the operational issue to include. It is in the best interest of this exercise. So EM, we have had one way to deal with this. The best way is a workshop. All right, thanks for that. Let's proceed to item 13, allocation mechanism for auto commodities Northern Cape, P2I Ltd in Kimberley, Northern Cape Province. Take the matter.
Thanks, Chairperson. I was just saying, Mr. Mapodi, can you just swiftly take us through that one? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Take the matters right and just talk to the key issues. Thank you. Proceed, sir.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The purpose of the submission is to request the PPS to note the allocation mechanism for third-party access to the auto commodities Northern Cape petroleum storage facility in Kimberley and approve the publication of the allocation mechanism on NERSA website. The allocation mechanism was assessed for compliance with Regulation 38 and 39. What is lacking in the allocation mechanism is the tariff schedule approved by the energy regulator. The tariff application submitted by Auto Commodities Northern Cape was rejected, and Auto Commodities Northern Cape was requested to submit a revised tariff application for consideration by the energy regulator. Currently, there are no third parties utilizing the facility or any request for third-party access being lodged for the facility. So the tariff schedule can be updated as soon as the NERSA approved tariff is available. In its allocation mechanism, Auto Commodities Northern Cape is willing to allow third parties to access the uncommitted capacity. It is recommended that the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee notes that Auto Commodities Northern Cape has lodged its allocation mechanism with the energy regulator for its petroleum storage facility located at Kimberley in the Northern Cape Province, and approves the publication of allocation mechanisms on the NERSA website. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, guidance from members? If not, by show of hands, members, if you approve the publication of the allocation mechanism on the NERSA's website, by show of hands. Thank you, Mr. Kumede. Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. Thank you, Madam Maseti. I also support the recommendation. So the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee notes the Auto Commodities Northern Cape lodgement of its allocation mechanism with the energy regulator for its petroleum storage facility located at Kimberley in the Northern Cape Province, as required by Regulation 3, Subdivision 6, and approves the publication of the allocation mechanism on NERSA's website. Thank you. We then proceed to the next item, which is closed to the public. At this juncture, I would like to thank all the members of the public that have been following us through the various platforms. And the meeting is then now closed to the public. Please, Mr. Mateja, if you may just indicate if indeed we are now switched off from those platforms.